Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Daitzman, editor-in-chief of The Intellectualist and host of History of the Present. This is a long-form interview series produced in partnership with Lincoln Square. History of the Present explores the major forces shaping our world in real time, whether it's artificial intelligence, technology, democracy in decline, democratic erosion, war, inequality, and the future of the international order. Today, I'm honored to be joined by President Toomas Hendrik Ilves, former president of Estonia. President Ilves has spent decades thinking about democracy, technology, NATO, and Russia, and the future of Europe. As president of Estonia, he helped make Estonia internationally recognized as one of the world's most digitally advanced democracies, while confronting the challenges posed by Russia's Vladimir Putin. Few leaders understand Russia, NATO, cyber warfare, and the modern security environment better than President Ilves. President Ilves, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Fine, as far as things can be.
As fine as things could be. Well, that sounds good. Mr. President, I'm going to play two clips, from the President of the United States. And I would like to understand if this corresponds with your understanding of international security, particularly from NATO's perspective. Sean, please.
So the Atomic Energy just reported that it was one of the most devastating bombings that they've ever seen. The whole mountain collapsed on top of it. And frankly, to go get it, we're going to go get it. But to go get it is a big deal because they say only China and us have the equipment where you can even get. The whole mountain is collapsed on top. We have cameras on it. You could make the case why are you even bothering, because it's not really valuable. It's, it's probably $500,000 worth. It's not very valuable stuff. But I think psychologically we want to get it.
At the press conference, you said you don't mind Iran having ballistic missiles. Can you elaborate on that? I want to make sure we understand your position.
No, I'm saying that if other countries have them, it's a little bit unfair for them not to have some. A ballistic missile is not the same thing as what we're talking about when we talk nuclear. But if Saudi Arabia and Qatar and they all have some, I would say in relative proportion, I think it's okay. That's what I mean.
Mr. President, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a view in your understanding that would be typical of, let's say, an American president, Democratic or Republican, sir?
Well, we do know that since beginning already with Richard Nixon, the U.S. has tried to negotiate with countries. Back then it was the Soviet Union, since they were the only competitor actually, about limiting and regulating the kinds of missiles that each side would have, be they intercontinental or medium range. This is a somewhat different approach to the idea of arms control.
And in your opinion, do you think Iran having access to ballistic missiles, Iran having possible access to this nuclear material, particularly regarding NATO's posture, does NATO consider that a threat?
Well, with the long-range missile that they apparently, or at least have said they have, we don't know, but certainly fired from Iran, most of Europe would be covered. Probably maybe Sweden and Finland would fall out of range, at least with what they claim they have. So I'm not sure this is particularly reassuring to members of NATO. And as I said, we sort of arms control has a almost 70-year history between two superpowers. Maybe it's gotten a little laxer since then, but nonetheless, it is a serious issue that some of the finest minds in the United States have grappled with over the years.
Mr. President, in recent months, we've been hearing more and more about Ukraine turning the tide of the war, particularly because they've been focusing on killing and wounding more Russians than Russia can send to the front. In your opinion, what do you how stable is Vladimir Putin's regime today? Let's say versus, I believe the invasion was it February 22nd, 2022? 24th, 2022. How stable would you say the Russian president's regime is today versus, let's say, 4 years ago?
Well, that's a long. I mean, I'll give you a long answer. I mean, the last several months, it seems in the last several months that popular opinion is less supportive than it was. It says nothing about the stability of his regime, since he has protecting him the Federal Protection Service, Rosguardia, which is kind of another military unit. He's got the FSB. He's got the army. I mean, he's got everything protecting him. So I don't think that he necessarily himself feels particularly, or that the situation is unstable. He does have clear signs of paranoia, but we can't say anything about stability. We do know that there's a lot of disquiet among people, especially not so much as regards to Ukraine, though that may have changed in the last day or so.
Right.
I keep humming Oily Rain to the tune of Prince's Purple Rain in my service run through here.
And just to say, the president's referring to there was a recent drone strike on a oil depot in Moscow, which gained attention because the lid of the oil depot flew into the air, and really, I think, really speaks to the war coming back to Russia. And Mr. President, please continue.
Yes, well, I mean, much of the problem has been in Moscow, people have not really have cared really about what's going on, 1,000 kilometers to the south, and the war has not affected them too much because, he was avoiding taking people to fight in Ukraine, so it was all more in the periphery and in the non-Russian parts of Russia. Several things have changed, though, and which have had, I think, an effect on the population. One, which may indicate his kind of fear, but which is that he shut down Telegram, which is it's the kind of like the WhatsApp combination WhatsApp and X or Twitter.
He didn't like the criticisms that were coming from Telegram. Right, accurate? Right.
Yeah, and especially because, in addition, there's a whole sort of class of people called the Russian war bloggers who are in place and posting videos. Casting doubt on the kind of general jingoist approach to Ukraine, that we're winning, and people in the so-called war bloggers are saying, well, it's not quite like that. In fact, it looks pretty bad. What has happened most recently is the development of middle-range drones on the part of the Ukrainians, with which they have basically really almost cut off Crimea.
Right.
Crimea is essentially without fuel. And
Mr. President, if I may just interject, what is Crimea to Russia and what is Crimea to Ukraine? Why is Crimea such a important symbol in some ways internationally and also in both respective nations, sir?
Well, I mean, well, I mean, Crimea has been part of Ukraine for hundreds and hundreds of years, more than hundreds of years. I mean, the Crimean Tatars have lived there for probably 800, 900 years. But in 1789, Catherine the Great, in a war, conquered it and made it part of Russia. So there is this, attitude among the Russian elite, but especially among with people like Vladimir Putin, who wrote a long sort of pseudo-historical screed in August of 2021 about the Ukrainian nation being little Russians and being the same people, and how Crimea has always been part of Russia. It is also a battleship in a sense, because basically from Crimea you can hit all of southern Ukraine with missiles, and which they have been doing for 4 years. Especially Odessa and Mykolaiv have been really badly hit. Even to this day, they have this horrific thing called human safaris, in which they send drones, first-person view drones, and if they see a person, they'll go kill them.
Any civilian.
Yeah, civilians. I mean, basically, from a historical point of view, you have two opposing views. One is that it's always been ours, from the Ukrainian side, and then this is somehow kind of a symbol of Mother Russia. Or Russia's empire. Certainly it was an imperial conquest. So you have that problem. And then people there don't have hardly any gas. And they are, with these new drones, are being cut off. Mm-hmm. The main supply routes have been cut off. On top of that, Ukraine has been pounding away at all possible refineries, oil storage depots all over Russia, or at least eastern half of Russia, up in St. Petersburg, down on the Black Sea, and then, well, elsewhere, and now in Moscow with these huge explosions. So what that has meant is that the war is coming home. You don't have telegram. You don't, especially if you're in the kind of elite in Moscow, you don't have telegram. It's hard to buy gas. Gas is being rationed. And so you're beginning to feel it in Moscow. That's one thing. The other thing I would say, I mean, what that is, that there is this, there's this other narrative that, the regime is unstable. I don't think the regime is at all unstable. I think, as I mentioned, with the various military bodies protecting Putin, both militarily and with the secret police, the FSB. But what I think Putin knows very well is that every major social change in Russia in the past 200 years has come when Russia has lost a war.
Right.
The Crimean War led to, they weren't necessarily for the better. The Crimean War ended, and then you got you got some kind of liberalization, freeing the serfs, but you also shortly thereafter had a real clampdown. You had, after the Russians lost the war against Japan in 1905, you had again, major reforms, the Lippmann reforms. And when the war was going badly, really badly for Russia in World War I, you had the February Revolution, which was a revolution, and then you had the October Putsch, which was not a revolution. And also, if you look at Afghanistan, when under Gorbachev, he said he called it quits in Afghanistan in 1986, and it was then that sort of a lot of popular discontent started to come out, especially in conjunction with Glasnost. So I think that Putin is very much in the mindset that I cannot lose this war. I will fight this to the bitter end and I will win. And on top of that, what feeds that as well is all kinds of recent evidence that's come out that he's been being fed a lot of nonsense. I mean, the old line about, which I used to use about myself, it's like, I'm a champignon in a mushroom factory, kept in the dark and fed a lot of bullshit. I mean, that seems to be what is going on with Donald Trump.
Mr. President, there are a lot of influencers, particularly American influencers, who paint a picture of Vladimir Putin as a protector of Christian values, that he's this good man who is waging a fight against liberalism. I'm curious, Mr. President, if you can please help dispel that, because there are unfortunately a number of Americans who have been swayed by this,
including members of Congress. Tucker Carlson. I did notice that Laura Loomer has done a 180 the last several days on Putin. But basically, I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, this is the repressions against Christians, be they, people don't know this. Jehovah's Witnesses have been oppressed for at least 20 years in Russia. If you're not a main religion of Russia, which means basically Orthodox or Muslim, it's rough. And of course, when it comes to Ukraine, the Ukrainian Orthodox have always always been somewhat different from the Russian Orthodox Church. And then, of course, in the West, you have the Uniate Church, which is sort of Eastern Rite, but Catholic. So it's kind of you have both the Rome and Moscow claiming it. And that was a problem already during the Soviet Union when Uniates were repressed. But today, I mean, the most recent thing was, they shot a missile at a church, the Lavra.
Yep.
I don't know, it's got a long name, but basically Moscow's an uninhabited swamp when this church was built.
Right.
So there is,
Kyiv is an older city than Moscow.
Much. But,
yes.
The fact that there was no Moscow when this cathedral was built. It's this Christian stuff is bizarre. Being for Christian values, if you mean by that sort of the traditional family values of that are part of the U.S. culture wars for 25 years.
Right.
I mean, the guy's got a number of illegitimate children. I mean, and mistresses. I mean, that's not really. I mean, that doesn't seem to make much of a difference in U.S. politics today. But
it might even be a boon in some circles, Mr. President.
Well, I mean, looking at all the people being arrested these days for pedophilia, and I don't know.
Yeah.
In any case, there is. I mean, the whole Christian thing is a total canard. There is nothing particularly religious about Russia. They have a very low church attendance rate. On top of that, I mean, you have the Russian Orthodox Church does things such as bless missiles with holy water, which has led to a problem, for example, in my own country, where we've been saying, okay, there's a Russian Orthodox, there are two Orthodox churches here. One of them is under Moscow, the other one is Estonian, and we're saying, like, do you follow these precepts when the head of the Russian Orthodox Church is urging soldiers to kill Ukrainians? It does not seem particularly Christian to us.
And Mr. President, my understanding is the head of the Orthodox Church is linked to the security services. Is that accurate?
Well, it seems to be. It's always been ever since Stalin's time. Well, I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask the CIA, frankly. But I mean, this. It seems that he has been. I mean, and because because the church is an instrument of state power,
right,
and a very powerful one. That whoever is head of the church is usually vetted. It gets even more complicated because there is a billionaire in Russia named Konstantin Malofeyev, who's who has financed all kinds of. Well, I think he financed part of Wagner, but has financed all kinds of military actions in Ukraine. Who is a hardcore Orthodox Christian. So where I mean, to say that somehow they're defending Christian values is real hard for me to take seriously.
If I were to dare to ask you to prognosticate, and I imagine you wouldn't want to, but if I were to ask you this, what happens right now? Russia is depending on Vladimir Putin. What happens the day after Vladimir Putin leaves the earth?
Well, that's probably when it all goes nuts. I mean, basically, because you will see, first of all, we know that all kinds of social protests have been clamped down for all of this time. Then we know that there are many different factions in the elite, and they'll be jostling for power. And here we can see. I mean, you can see real hardliners. I mean, who think that we should just nuke Ukraine, basically. I don't want to. I mean,
yeah.
And then you have people saying the economy is going to hell, which it is. And that, I mean, we see this already sort of movement in this direction with fights over the direction of the economy. There was a recent report. Again, you have to take all of this. Basically, everything from Russia comes down to Churchill's expression about the Soviet Union, about dogs fighting under a rug, and you have no idea what they're doing, but you hear the growling, and occasionally a bone gets thrown out. That's where we are with this. But one of the sort of info bits that came out was that there was a meeting with Putin, the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Finance. And the Minister of Finance apparently said, we can't sustain anything outside of the military with the current level of income from or revenues there, and the military demanded, no, we must get our money. Now, what's happened there is that revenue has been dramatically decreasing. First of all, with the cap on oil prices from the EU. Secondly, with less and less oil because because the storage, the refineries are being blown up. We have acute shortages of gasoline. Maria Zaharova, the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, already made an appeal a few days ago that she hopes our friends will help us with gasoline. So, I mean, there are serious economic problems going on there, and I mean, you can look at all kinds of other data. Looking at sort of the trains. I mean, how much they're carrying, less and less. They're making less, except for weapons. So it's a real war economy right now. How long people will put up with the war economy, who knows? But my guess is still that until the war if the war is lost, then that's when you'll start seeing genuine sort of movement.
Mr. President, in a recent episode, we had a former defense official, a gentleman named Alex Plitzis, and in the conversation, we discussed how we are actually in a global war, even if it's not necessarily being described as a global war, particularly in the media. And we sort of went about it like this: was obviously Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Russia is getting help from North Koreans, which are an enemy of the United States, and also our ally, South Korea. Russia is getting help from Iran in terms of Shahed drones, and also China is doing much in state power to keep Russia going because of sanctions and economic issues. And then obviously you have the October 7th, 2023 attacks on the state of Israel by Hamas, which has led to the latest conflict as related. How do you see this globally now in terms of almost, I believe the president of Poland said something about we are in the pre-war era, I believe. And I believe there have been defense officials from major NATO countries like the United Kingdom and France who are basically saying we have to be prepared. Mr. President, is that your understanding?
Well, I would add to that. I mean, what we experience in Europe, especially in Northern Europe, from let's say Germany on up, but all over Europe, is what is euphemistically called hybrid war.
Right.
And hybrid war, look, I mean, it's an absurd term. It's basically a euphemism used to avoid any action on the part of NATO.
It's war.
But I mean, if you take von Clausewitz, he said, war is the continuation of policy by other means. Well, this is quite the continuation of policy by other means, and it's gotten quite nasty. I mean, we've seen this for a while already. I mean, we saw the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko in the UK with polonium. We saw the poisoning of the Skripal in the UK, plus 2 UK citizens there, after which nothing happened. It was all kind of hushed up.
Yep.
For years, the German government did not want to deal with these things, but we see more and more that they're changing their tune. We have had DHL, which is kind of like FedEx, planes loaded with bombs that fortunately did not go off in the plane.
I believe that was Russia, right?
Well, I mean, in that case, we actually do know it's Russia because we know the trail of how it came from Russia to Estonia, went through Latvia, went to Lithuania, got put on the plane there. We've had ammunition storehouses blown up in the Czech Republic.
Right.
We've had an assassination attempt on the head of Rheinmetall, the biggest arms manufacturer in Europe. It's kind of like if Lockheed Martin's president was targeted. We've had attempts to derail trains in Poland, passenger trains, all of these. I mean, we've avoided so far a mass casualty event. And when it comes to NATO, of course, they're loath to actually admit this, and they say, "Oh, it's not really clear who did it." And after all, it's a national issue. This came up when we had cable cuttings between us and the Finns, and then between Sweden and the Latvians. I mean, this is all. I mean, it's the term hybrid is nonsense, but it's being used so not to deal with it. Right. So I mean, yes, I think, it's certainly been ever since his speech in February 2007 in the Munich Security Conference, Vladimir Putin has basically declared war against the West. And you see on the part of Xi in China that, a rejection of basic fundamental, Western tenets, sort of, rule of law, fundamental rights and freedoms, and so forth. Certainly Iran is no...
Yeah.
It's and I mean, it's ideologically, it's against all of those parts of the West, and on top of that is theocratic. And well, when you get to North Korea, which sends troops to fight in Ukraine, well, it seems to be quite a wide range of countries that are explicitly anti-Western. And how they act, I mean, they take different forms, be it sort of so-called hybrid, or do you invade a sovereign country like Ukraine? Are there various shenanigans around Taiwan and with Philippine fishing boats? I mean, it is a general sort of these vectors of hostility in all directions from those countries.
Mr. President, how is and this is really for the American audience who are watching this, Mr. President, how is the Trump administration perceived, particularly by the European public, but also by European elites?
Mercurial would be the word.
Is that another euphemism?
No, no. I mean, mercurial means constantly switching, like, sort of, you don't know what his attitude is going to be. One day it's one thing, another day it's another. And so trying to sort of figure out how to approach the president of the United States has been a problem for all of the leaders. Some people try to be more, well, on one end you have the ultimate sycophancy of the NATO Secretary General, right, calling Donald Trump daddy, and then on the other end you have Prime Minister Sanchez of Greece. On the other hand, you have Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain, basically building up. I mean, he's going into an election, and since he has all kinds of other problems, it's quite clear he's staking his re-election on being as anti-American as possible.
And how does that, and if you can maybe connect it to, how does our posture that has changed since the Biden presidency, how does that affect the American business, American commerce, the perception of Americans, particularly, Mr. President, what I'm getting to is soft power, okay? And soft power is as important as hard power, right? Because without soft power, hard power, coercion you can only do coercion so long, or it becomes brittle. But with soft power, right? And soft power, it could be music, we could be doing friendly things, etc.
Coca-Cola, McDonald's,
exactly. I recall seeing a video of the first McDonald's that opened in Moscow, and there was a sense of joy there. So, in terms of soft power, though, if we are assumed global politics can be a zero-sum game, how is soft power in relatively speaking, for the United States as it relates to our NATO and European allies?
That's a tough one, because you really have to parse it out into different aspects of it. I don't really. If you look at sort of sort of opinion polls on Americans, they remain positive. Opinion polls, though, there was one last week. Nobody trusts the United States political system.
Yeah,
I mean, it's there was a devastating poll that appeared last week, and you can find it on Politico Europe. Oh, it was published by ECFR, the European Council on Foreign Relations. And I mean, the results there were devastating for the United States. There is no real trust in the felt toward the United States, and that is, and that's a result of sort of unpredictability. First of all, there was the whole Liberation Day tariffs thing, which,
Right.
well, actually started with Vance's attack last February at the Munich Security Conference on Europe.
On the free press of Europe, right?
Well, I mean, Estonia is number 2 in the world in freedom of the press. So we're looking at going like, what? I mean, U.S. is 57 between, I think, like Ghana and Sierra Leone or some other sort of country like that.
Yeah.
So that was bizarre. And then we had the we know that ever since 1989, Donald Trump has been urging the United States to leave NATO. So that's a constant drumbeat and a constant threat. But then we had the tariffs that came out of the blue unilaterally. Well, Europe ended up accommodating those, agreeing to them, though against considerable opposition. I think the killer was the whole, we're going to take Greenland. That was really a dramatic turning point, and suddenly the feeling was like, is NATO anything? I mean, if the United States threatening or implying a military takeover, which we got, sort of wasn't explicitly said, but sort of.
But they're engaging in the Trump administration is engaging in information operations against Greenland.
There's a great piece in the New Yorker last week on this. I would recommend. It's really, and then I mean, since then there has been this reticence to really address the United States and just sort of hoping everything works out. I mean, that's what the G7 was about. It was kind of like, let's have a good G7 meeting here because we really don't want to blow up the NATO summit next month. So everyone treads carefully. Also, I should say what was another kind of shock was actually the war in Iran, where nobody in NATO was consulted, and then the U.S. turned around and started bashing the Europeans for not getting into the war, whereas, I mean, no one told us. So it's been so the lack of trust is really I think the big issue among the leaders of Europe. Among the population, it's more or less the same. But I would say it is not directed at Americans. It's directed at
some.
I mean, it's whatever the U.S. I mean, just U.S. policies right now are not trusted, and this after basically 80 years of aligning oneself with the United States as the kind of the beacon of fundamental rights and freedoms and rule of law, and that was certainly the line pushed by successive administrations, regardless of whether they were Republican or Democratic. They were, I mean, that part of foreign affairs remained more or less the same. But this bashing of Europe, not only by Vance, but there was a
D-Day.
Under Secretary of State for Public Affairs has been really sort of going after the U.S. After Europe, sorry.
Mr. President, how is it perceived in capitals in Europe? I believe it was Secretary Hegseth, the defense secretary. He goes by the Secretary of War, but let's just go by the Constitution. The U.S. Secretary of Defense, or people associated with him, suggesting that the sacrifices of NATO allies in Afghanistan were sort of so what?
Well, that was another thing that really burned a lot of people. I mean, Estonia, very small country, but with our losses, basically, I think on a per capita basis, we're number 3.
Yeah.
And we thought, I mean, that was quite insulting. And you saw how then the U.S. embassy pulled out the Danish flags. They had lost like 400 men in Afghanistan, and then the offended Danes, in a quiet sort of Scandinavian way, went and put 419, or I don't know exact what number of Danish flags in front of the embassy, and the embassy went and trashed them all. It doesn't really, this is they ought to look at Dale Carnegie's How to Friends and Influence People. It was not probably the best move. And this bashing that is sort of directed at the Europe by the United States really is backfiring. I mean, I think if the rhetoric were a little bit more toned down, I personally, however, I will say that when I see sort of read, like, the State Department has a blog. The first one was all about how the roots of America lay in St. Thomas Aquinas. I mean, look, I grew up yes, the first line of the Declaration of Independence is a paraphrase of John Locke. I mean, and the United States.
One word though, they did change.
Property and happiness. Yeah, but I mean, the whole idea of sort of Montesquieu's influence on the sort of the separation of powers between judicial and legislative and executive. I mean, basically, the United States was founded on ideas of the European 18th century Enlightenment.
Yes.
Not on St. Thomas Aquinas, as brilliant as he
may have influenced people later on.
Well, but the point is,
yeah,
and I would also say that maybe if you have the first time in 2,000 years the Pope is from the Augustinian order,
right,
and based on Saint Augustine, the first great mind of Christianity, who had a whole theory of just war.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you're a recent convert to Catholicism, maybe it's not a good idea to dispute the first Augustinian Pope's ideas about just war. that's my personal opinion.
And just to be clear, Mr. President, you're talking about Vice President J.D. Vance, who
yes,
is a recent convert who has been almost debating with the Catholic, with basically officials of the Vatican about canon law, particularly.
Yes, well, I mean, the just war theory is the particular point. And of course, calling out the nuncio, which would be the Catholic Church's ambassador to the United States, and yelling at him at the Pentagon, maybe also wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, I think many would agree with that. Mr. President, how is it perceived? So obviously, you know American foreign policy. I imagine you remember the Iraq War, and we had people like Senator Lindsey Graham, who is the Republican senator from the state of South Carolina, very much a hawk, and he would follow Senator John McCain, a Republican senator from Arizona, in pretty much everything he did. When the current president of the United States turned on Senator McCain and mocked his war injuries, which he received from torture, Senator Graham appeared to follow the president, and today has done a complete 180 in his prior beliefs. And also, you look at Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio was known for supporting NATO, for supporting American power overseas. These are people who are probably known to other European elites in this space. How are they perceived now?
Well, if you look on my Twitter page, you'll see that the banner there is with me and John McCain.
Right.
We were friends. I mean, since basically 1993. So, I mean, a man for whom I had huge respect. And whenever he was in Europe, not every time, but often we would get together. So I was just kind of personally, I found it horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
That you would turn on, that anyone would even question his
Integrity.
and but I guess, I mean, that's something that people who are running foreign policy right now, and not just pensioners like me, who have to deal with the United States, think quite a bit about how do these people whom we have known for a long time, who have now kind of done a big change, a course correction, as it were.
Mm.
What do we think about what they're saying, and will this last? One of the things in the ECFR poll that I mentioned, what was striking was that how low was the percentage of people who thought the United States would change after the current administration.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's an indication of what the general attitude is that, well, looks like this is what the future of the relationship is going to be about.
Mr. President, I assume Estonia, I believe, has a much better social safety net, for instance, than we experience here in the United States. For instance,
well, we're not really very socialist, but yeah, we have, sort of.
That's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm getting to. But but you, in terms of poverty, in terms of housing, in terms of food, the floor is higher in Estonia than it is in the United States.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, it's also the roof isn't doesn't have a lot of trillionaires either.
Right, and so that's what I want to understand, Mr. President. And maybe this is maybe a different sort of question than the others. Is in the United States, the debate here, as I'm sure you know, is universal health care. That's communist. Giving people food who are hungry, that's communist. Giving people who are homeless homes, that's communist. But my understanding is that Finland, countries like Estonia, they have much better social safety net, much better security socially. And because of that, you have greater social cohesion and probably less challenges in terms of, like in the United States, and again, just very complex. But our floor is much lower than yours, right? So we will have people living on the streets.
No one would call my country leftist. I mean,
right.
We have center-right governments for years and years. We have basically our healthcare system is we pay for it. It's part of we have a tax,
the social contract,
and the tax. Basically everyone pays a percentage of their income. This irks some people who make a lot of money, saying, why do I have to pay such a high percentage? But basically everyone accepts it. It's kind of a solidarity thing. And sure, if you're 28 and you've made your first, you have your first unicorn, which we have 10 unicorns in this country. So we're like highest in the world.
And what is a unit, just for, because people might not know what that term is?
A company worth $1 billion. Yeah, I mean, go like, why should I pay all this? I mean, I don't use those things. And you're 28, you're not using medical service at all. On the other hand, people generally do accept the idea that there is this kind of solidarity. But no one is going for, I mean, no one's going to go bankrupt for health care. So anyway, we have that. Homelessness, well, given our climate, we do have to deal with homelessness because it's not California,
right,
in the winter. So we have that, and we do have, relatively generous for our level of income, relatively generous programs for the poor. I mean, it's not perfect, but It's standard European stuff. But that, I mean, two things. One is that, okay, the Gini coefficient in which is a measure of income disparity, is fairly low in all of Europe. And we're right in the middle of the income disparity, the range. I mean, these numbers don't mean anything. In comparison, basically, the United States is way off the charts.
Yeah. We're closer to Brazil and Russia.
Yeah, you are. So that's like, well, I mean, that's a choice that we make. But with all of this kind of social media attacks on so-called Euro poors, here I would say, yes, there are significant problems in Europe that we have not addressed, and which I have been sort of wanting people to address, that have to do with the kind of investment laws we have, with the way the priorities sometimes of the European Union. So in fact, yes, we are not as rich as the United States. The question then becomes, even if you are the poorest state in the United States and you have a higher GDP per capita than the richest country in Europe, well, you can do that in dollar terms. I still think that if you're the richest country in, the richest state in the United States, you don't have the kind of opportunities and life and quality of life that you do in most EU countries.
And that really has to go with social mobility, right? So in the United States, we have, since President Reagan, which, basically we went for supply side economics, meaning that we send tax receipts to the rich from the poor, sort of reverse Robin Hood. The Gini coefficient obviously has increased and has gotten much worse. And we're now sort of at this point where in the United States, social mobility has moved very much backwards. And I just want to bring this because, Mr. President, getting kind of tying this to technology, AI, do you the question of just again, changing subjects, minimum universal basic income. There's a lot of talk about AI, not maybe in its current form, but it's going to improve. It's probably going to lead to some degree of mass unemployment, and there's sort of disagreement as to what much and how much, but it will have an effect. Do you believe that the next stage in any sort of social contract with, let's say, Europe or Estonia, etc., do you believe that conversation is becoming ripe?
It's not happening yet because there's not enough evidence of people losing their jobs due to AI. You read about layoffs at Facebook or someplace. But it has not yet become a significant phenomenon in Europe. Not yet. It will come, I assume. I'm not sure how we will deal with it here. There's been talk about UBI, but it really hasn't gotten anywhere yet. I think that's a way off. What's more important for Europe are a series of reforms that have been outlined by the former head of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi. It's kind of things that probably really would be very boring for your
Sure.
But things like unified capital markets, which certainly explains why the investment money, even from Europe, all goes into the United States. Unified electrical or power grids, which means that we have huge disparities. Without the kind of investment that we need, without the ability to invest in European bonds rather than individual countries, you will not get that big leap in AI that is necessary, nor will you get the big leap in building the data centers that are necessary to fuel AI. And that's going to be the real challenge in the near to middle future. UBI will come, I think, will rise up once AI is significant enough a factor that people start losing their jobs.
Mr. President, we really appreciate your time today. Really have two more questions. First question is, why should Americans go to Estonia?
It's a very cool country. I just had a former U.S. diplomat here visiting the last 3 days. He said he thought it was he said it was probably the best country to come out of communism, so he likes it. Why Estonia? I don't know. I mean, you look at the numbers. It's not the Estonian numbers, but I mean, because we don't have those. But last year was the first year ever that more Americans immigrated to Europe than Europeans went to the United States. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have several close friends who either have moved or are in the process of doing so. So, I mean, there's something appealing about Europe. I don't know if you've ever seen these memes, of
course,
with two Italian DJs.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, usually those come up after someone from the U.S. again bashes Europe about being, whatever we get bashed for. I mean, look, as you can tell from my New Jersey accent, somewhat ameliorated from what it was. But I mean, I lived in the United States and went both to undergraduate and graduate school there. And as a child of refugees and lots and lots of relatives who were deported or shot by the Soviets, have always valued the fundamental ideals of the United States in ways that often Americans don't. Because if you haven't had relatives shot, deported, or you're like, you
don't appreciate it until it's gone.
Right. And so I always kind of held the United States in a special regard, especially during its role defending, sort of post CSCE, defending human rights, the third basket of the CSCE, which was really a big wedge to get the Soviet Union and other communist countries to support or respect human rights and free dissidents and so forth. And so now when I look at it, it's a really distressing turn that I see, because my whole efforts in Estonian politics was to make it a liberal democracy, small L there. I know in the US liberals means something else, but a liberal democracy. And I put a lot of effort into that through the years. Estonia is the only East European country, by the way, that has gay marriage legalized, which some countries in Western Europe don't even do, like Italy. But anyway, we're a liberal democracy. It's not and it's it's an okay place to live, though in the winter it's a little harsh, I would say, at least if you're my age.
Last question. We try, some of the subject we cover on the show can be so heavy and maybe negative. I'm curious, Mr. President, what are you optimistic about?
Look, you can't ask an Estonian what is he optimistic about. Estonians we're not known for our optimism. It's more for sort of grim realism and grit. I'm optimistic about the strength of our defense forces, which are really good. I'm optimistic about the quality of our tech sector, which is one of the best in Europe. I'm optimistic that it doesn't rain for the next 3 days. And so, but I think that I do think that the path that Europe is on, aside from the problems that I mentioned before about sort of technical economic things, but I do think that the values that we have in Europe and in Estonia in terms of well, George Herbert Walker Bush talked about a kinder, gentler America. Well, I would say that if you're looking for a kinder, gentler West, you'll find it in Europe. A little more tolerant, a little less of the heavy rhetoric, angry rhetoric. I mean, of course, there's all there. I mean, but still, it's things are more polite.
Right. Well, Mr. President Ilves, it was an honor to have you on History of the Present today to talk about all these issues that are so relevant, so contemporary, and it would be an honor to have you come back on again, sir. And I just want to say thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back.
Great. Well, it was fun, and well, you have my email address, so let me know.